Greetings, YouTube. Today, I'm going to talk about stat blocks on monsters. And I'm going to be looking at AD&D Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, its spiritual successor, Pathfinder 1st Edition, and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because I see these as one continuing arc. And we're going to start with the classic. This is the 4th printing from 1979. And you can see it is well worn, and there's a rainbow with a unicorn. Actually, a Pegasus. Is that a Pegasi straight up? Yes, it's a Pegasi. I thought it was a Pegasi with a unicorn horn, but I was wrong. So we're just gonna flood. I want to do. I flipped open and I got to devils. I don't like devils. So let's just look at something classic. Let's find a classic. Take a look at a classic. We'll go with the Afridi. How's that? We'll go with the Afridi. Okay, so this is the classic stack block that I was first introduced to back in '78. I didn't have a copy of this in '78, but I eventually did get my own. The first book I actually purchased might have been the DM's Guide. I'm not positive on that one. Alrighty, so we start out with the bold of the name. Then we go in directly into frequency, which in it says very rare, which isn't shocking. Then it says number appearing, which is 1. Armor class 2, and remember that back then, the lower the armor class was, the better the armor class was. Yeah, I know it didn't make any sense. Remember Thaco? Anyone out there remembers Thaco? Give me a like. Armor class 2, and then it gives movement 9/24, and that signifies its land movement, which was a 9. They weren't very fast, apparently, on the ground. 12 was the standard for a human. If I remember correctly, is 12 standard for a human? Maybe. I think it was. Yeah, I think that was a standard. And then flying 24, they were quick in the air. You didn't have a class of skill in the air at that time. It was just like if you could fly, you could fly. It was just a generic skill. Then we have the hit dice, which is 10. So they didn't give a specific number of hit points for the monster, and you were usually hit dice for standard were 1d8. So that'd be 45 hit points. You just round it. I would tend to do just round it to average. 4.5 is the average. So boom, 45 hit points. Unless it was a particularly powerful feat, then I might bump it up from there. That's the kind of thing you did on the fly. Percentage in lair. Nil in this particular case. Treasure type nil. That was again the percentage of there being something in the lair. Number of attacks 1. Damage per attack 3 to 24, and that's a weird number. That's just a strange range in my book. I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's a weird range. Then we have special attacks, see below. Special defenses, nil. Do they have any special defenses on an Afridi? That's kind of interesting. You'd think they would, even back in first edition. All right. And they offer, for example, they didn't give it specific that they would be immune to fire, not in the stat block itself. Oh, okay. Then we get special defenses none, magical resistance standard. I don't remember what that means, but just imagine that they're not saying there's a specific thing they are vulnerable or immune to, kind of thing. Then we have the intelligence vary. So you didn't get actual statistics for each monster. So there was not going to be a strength dexterity. You just got the very basics for this. And so intelligence was vary. Then we have alignment, which is neutral, tending towards lawful evil. That's interesting, but that's the way they wrote it up. All right. Then we have size, large, and it says 12 foot tall. Psychic ability, psionic ability, nil. Attack and defense modes, nil. This was back when psionics was significantly different than it was in like 3.5. Then you have your stat block itself, and then just a general description, and anything really pertinent. Free are able to communicate with any intelligent creature they encounter by means of a limited form of telepathy, which enables them to understand and speak appropriately. Now, that in later editions, those kind of things we built into the stat block, we'll see that. And that frees are able to travel the material elemental to the material, elemental, and astral planes. And again, it's so much of this was assumed. You just assume they are immune to fire. Because how could they not be? Do you know what I mean? There's just holes in this. There's holes in this in a way that you just don't find in later editions, which are more specific. Okay, so that is the classic first edition stat block. So now I'm going to pull up mine. I have a PDF here on my screen of 3.5. I didn't bother to go to 3. I prefer 3.5 over 3 anyway. And I skipped second edition because the difference between first edition and second edition in my book weren't enough to worry about. I freely used first and second edition material when I was GMing second edition. I would just translate it on the fly. So there was no requirement for me to look anything up or do any kind of conversion on that. They were so similar. Okay, so now we're going to do the entry for the Aboleth, which is one of my favorite aberrations in the entire system. I just love the Aboleth, and I've also often really enjoyed how people have interpreted them. Okay, we start out with, now again, we're getting more specifics here. So the first thing it says Aboleth, and it says huge aberration aquatic. So you're getting more specific here. Then we go straight into hit dice, 8d8 plus 40, so 76 hit dice. We go to initiative, so now you actually have some gaming stats right there. You know that when you're rolling initiative for these guys, or these things, I should say, you're going to get over a +1. The speed is 10 feet, 2 squares, which is interesting. They specified 2 squares. That's interesting. I don't know if I've ever noticed that before, that they specified 2 squares. Back when I was running 3.5, I guess I just didn't really think about it. But now it's interesting. And then it says swim 60 feet because standard speed for a human in this edition was 30 feet. So these things are not fast on land, which is not shocking. They're big fish things with tentacles, so they're not really meant for galloping. But they are fast in the water because they are big fish things. And we have the armor class, which is 16, and then it breaks the armor class down. So it says -2 to size. So if the size of the thing were to change, you would have to adjust the armor class appropriately. Then we have +1 dex to denote that these things are slightly more dexterous than average. We have a +7 natural because they are just very tough physically. They have thick skin, scales, however you want to interpret them. Then it gives the touch. Now the touch AC is only a 9, and that means that if you are using a touch attack, which means just having to get, essentially, if you're just aiming at the hitbox, to use a video game reference, you're just aiming at the hitbox, it's an armor class 9. And then it gives flat-footed 15, which means that if you are sneaking up on it, though I'm not 100% sure how you do that, if you're sneaking up on it, its armor class is 15. So that's just going to cancel out the +1 dexterity. Then we have the base attack / grapple. So the base attack is +6 and the grapple is +22. They are very good at grappling, apparently. Then we have the attack type, and the attack is, in this case, is a tentacle +12 melee, and it does 1d6 +8 plus slime. The slime is a special ability that will be described later. Then we have space reach 15 and 10. So it occupies a 15-foot square, and it has a reach of 10 feet. So it's a big object that's going to have a long reach. No, actually, I might actually say it was a 15 by 10 because they're longer than they are wide. I don't remember. I don't think it ever actually came into play when we were actually I actually used these things. Then we have the special attacks. In this case, it is Enslave, Psionics, and Slime. Special qualities, we have Aquatic, Subtype, Dark Vision, 60 foot, and Mucus Cloud. It's interesting that the Dark Vision is buried so deeply into this stat block. Next, we have your saves, which are now broken into the 3 saves as opposed to first edition, which had 5 saves. I know people who like that. I thought they were strange. I prefer the 3 based off of the stats. It's always been more elegant and easier to explain in my book. And these guys they have decent. It's +7 for fort, +3 for reflex, and +11 for will. So pretty decent saves. Obviously, because they're big kind of objects, big creatures, they don't have a great reflex save. They're just it's not easy for them to move out of the way of something. So if you're going to be going after something, use abilities that require a reflex save, and they're not going to succeed as often. Then we have the abilities. Now we have the actual stats for strength, dex, con, and you do the physical stats first, and then we have intelligence, wisdom, charisma. I've always found it interesting that we always do them in that order as a holdover from first edition. Because if you really wanted to have this make sense, I understand why you want to have all of the physical in line and all the mental in line, but it also would make a lot of sense to do that alphabetically. So it would have mental first, and the mental would then be charisma, intelligence, and wisdom, and then you would have physical, because P comes after M, and then you would do con, dex, and strength. But no, this goes strength, dex, con, because that's how we've always done it, and then intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, because that's always how we've done it. Now, these things are strong. You have a 26 dex, 26 strength, and remember that 10 to 11, or a 10 is considered the average human. Dex of 12, again, not dexterous. And con of 20, they are tough. Intelligence of 15, which is actually not as high as I thought it would be. Wisdom 17 and charisma 17. There are no bonuses explained in the stat block itself for their statistics. So you have to infer that if you need those during the encounter. Then we get to skills, and they break the skills down into concentration, which I always thought was weird that concentration was its own skill. Concentration really should just be derived from whatever skill you're referencing it to. That, to my book, was always a little weird. There were some strange skill breakdowns in 3.5. If they're good at concentration, they have knowledge, any one, +13, so I guess they have a field of expertise. They're good at listening, good at spotting, and they are good at swimming. Then we have feats, alertness, combat casting, and iron will. And then we have the environment, which is underground. Organization, solitary, a brood, which is 2 to 4, or a slaver brood, which is 1 die 3 +1 +7 to 12 scum. I believe scum are a humanoid fishy race, if I'm not incorrect. Then we have the challenge rating, which is 7. Do they have that written? No, they don't have the challenger rating written up. Yes, maybe I'm remembering Pathfinder. Okay, so many stat blogs in my head. Then we have treasure, double standard. Again, making the inference. You know what standard means, or you know how to reference what standard is. The alignment, usually lawful evil. Advancement, and this is cool because if you want to have a bigger, badder creature, this gives you a rough idea of what the bigger, badder creature is going to be, and it says 9 to 16 hit dice, which is a huge, or a 17 to 24 hit dice, which is gargantuan. And you really don't be facing a gargantuan aboleth. They are very, very damn nasty. Now, let's go up to the written block. Now, the text on these things is always going to be first. So they have the text and then they have the block, as opposed to the first edition, which was the block and then the text. And they give the description. There's an actual little blurb like the cool, refreshing water suddenly erupts in a storm of reaching, grasping tentacles. The tentacles connect to a primeval fish 20 feet at length, forming a bulbous head, its crescent-shaped tail. 3 slit-shaped eyes protected by bony ridges are set on top, atop the other in the front of its head, which remains just beneath the surface as it attacks. So a freaky-looking fish. The illustration's pretty good. And then you get a description of its overall, they are as far as the society and everything goes. Then they go into combat. And then there's actually going to be going into a subcategory, which is Aboleth Mage, and they have their own stat block as well. And then that is the totality of the stat block. Now we're going to go into Pathfinder First Edition. There we go. The Pathfinder First Edition, and the first monster, I just happened to pull this up. I didn't pick one at random, which is the Asamar. A-A-S-I-M-A-R. I always assumed it was Asamar as opposed to Asamar, or Asamar, but Asamar, that's how I always pronounced it. And here we go, right off the bat, there is the critical, there's the challenge rating in the bold bar that has the name in it, as well as 3 symbols that I do not remember what they mean. Now, if you're not as familiar with the system, using symbols for notations can be shorthand, but it can also lead to opacity. I don't remember what those are off the top of my head. I just don't. Okay, and I'm not even sure if I ever did. I always thought that was kind of a gimmick that I never really loved a whole lot, and I still don't. First thing they get here is the XP 200. Now, this to me is important. Knowing what the XP value of a creature is right in the get-go, out of the gate, to me is important. So I appreciate this. This is, and the specific Asamar being described here is an Asamar Cleric 1. So we're looking at a first level cleric. It says neutral good, medium, outsider, / in parentheses, native. So you know that they belong here physically, but they are still considered an outsider. So you can't banish them to someplace else because this is where they live. This is where they're from. They just happen to be of a outsider bloodline. Next, we get the initiative. In this case, it's a +1. Then we get senses, which is dark vision, 60 foot, and perception +5. Having the senses in that first block, a section of this overall stat block, is very important. And having the perception is good because that is something that will be pertinent to an encounter. Then we have then we go into the section which is subcategory of defense, and I like the fact that they break it down from defense, offense, and it's again because every single one of these is the same. That'll tell me what I need to know very quickly. Very quickly, boom! Look at this, and I know exactly where I have to go. All right, so we have on this one it's an AC 15, touch is 10, flat-footed 15, +5 armor. And again, they're breaking it down so that you know how to adjust this on the fly. So you're not going to have to wonder what's the touch AC on this thing, what's the flat-footed AC on this thing. Nope, it's all right there. And then it says hit point is 11, and you know it's a 1d8 +3. Again, the fortify, reflex, and will, same stat block is 3.5, and this is +4, +0, and +5. So again, if you're going after this particular Asamar, they're a cleric. Aim for things that require a reflex save. They're less likely to succeed. Then we get to resistances, and this is obviously built into the defense block, and I always appreciate that as well. Acid 5, cold 5, and electricity 5. I've never liked acid as an energy form because acid is a physical object. When I run Pathfinder, I always switch. Acid exists as there are spells and effects and things that are acid, but as far as energy goes, I use sonic. I realize that sonic isn't an energy type either, but at least it isn't a physical object. It is right up there with electricity, cold, and fire. Remember, cold really isn't an energy type either. It's the absence of energy. But at least it isn't. At least those things are not physical objects. I guess because fire isn't really a physical object, but it's been a byproduct. Yeah, let's not get into physics. But yeah, it's not a physical thing. So I've always preferred sonic, and that also makes more sense if you're going to be doing elemental energy because crystals are mineral type things. So that to me makes a much better connection. I've never equated acid to rocks, whereas I do equate vibrational abilities to rocks. How many of us own quartz watches? Then we get into the offensive block. And here the first thing out of the gate is the speed, which is 30 feet. And again, the average for a human is 30 feet. And this particular Asamar is going to be only moving at 20 feet because they're wearing heavy armor. Then we get into melee, and it says the heavy mace, -1, because apparently they aren't very strong. So why would the heck are they using? I guess you have to have some kind of a melee a weapon as a backup. And that's going to be 1 die 8 -1. Then we have a ranged, which is a light crossbow, which is +0, and it gives 1d8/1920. So that's giving you the damage, and then also the critical strike, critical hit bracket. So in this particular weapon, if you get a 19 or 20, you have potentially achieved a critical hit. You then have to roll a confirmation. I never liked that mechanic much either, I got to be honest with you. Having to roll a second time to get a critical hit was, I think, very awkward. Then we have special attacks, and this is this is purely a personal thing, but after each of these things, like AC, then it gives number 15, resist, and it just gives the acid. There's no punctuation, and I think there should be punctuation, you know what I mean? And each of the abilities listed is lowercase, and they're all lowercase. And my brain wants the first word to be uppercase. It should be a capital letter in my brain, and the fact that they aren't always bugged me a little. But then again, I have a Chromebook, and all the letters on the Chromebook keyboard are lowercase, which was weird the first time I looked at it. It says special attacks on this is a channel positive energy 5 times per day, 1d6, and the DC for that is a 12. So try to overcome it. You will be trying to beat a number 12. Then we have rebuke death, and it says 1d4 + 1, 6 times per day, which is interesting that they put the 5 times per day 1d6 under channel positive, but under rebuke death, it's 1d4 + 1, 6 times a day. So, never noticed that before either. Then we have touch of good 6 times per day. Spell-like abilities, and it says caster level 1, so you know that that's what the power is. And it says daylight 1/ per day, daylight spell. Then it says spells prepared, which is different because this is not built into them. This is the fact that they have a class, whereas these spell-like abilities, which are different from extraordinary abilities, there are some complexities here. Yes, there is. Spell-like abilities, which is different. And then that gives you, what we got down? First, we have Bless, first level spells, Bless, Command, DC 14, so if you have to run a resistant. Protection from evil, and there's a little D after that, so you're going to have to look that up. And then it gives at will, so they can do protection from evil at will. Detect magic, guidance, and stabilize. Alrighty. Sorry, 0 level spells. That's right. Yeah, sorry. Then it says domain spell, and it says domains good and healing. Next, we get into the physical block. Now, this is what you're going to be looking at for the actual statistics of the creature in question. So now it says statistics, and then we go into strength 8, dex 10, con 14, intelligence 13, wisdom 17, and charisma 14. So they didn't cheat out on the con at least, but they aren't all that dexterous, and they are weak. Then it gives your base attack, which is +0, your CMD, which is, I can't remember what that abbreviation is, but essentially your physical combat special abilities, -1, and your defense, which is a 9. Feats turn undead. We get skills. It's one of those situations where I've seen an abbreviation so long I've just kind of built it into my brain. I forget what the abbreviation means. It's not the first time this has happened to me. I have to, I was a member of the SCA for a very long time. I often have to stop and remember if it's like, is it Society for Creative Anachronism or Society of Creative Anachronism? Yeah. Then we have feats turn undead, skills, diplomacy +8, heal +7, knowledge parentheses original, religion +5, racial modifiers, which is a +2 to diplomacy and +2 to perception. Then we have languages, celestial, common, and draconic. And we have ecology. Now, I like the ecology block a lot. Environmental, any land. Organization, solitary, pair, or team, and it says team is 3 to 6. Then it says treasure, it says NPC gear, scale mail, heavy mace, light crossbow with 10 bolts, and other treasure, which would be appropriate for a first level character, which is not going to be much, obviously. And then the next entry is, in fact, the aboleth. What a shock on that one. So that is the first edition Pathfinder. This is going to be a really long video, and I apologize for that. First edition Pathfinder, and now we're going to get into the second edition Pathfinder. So I have to get back into my phone because it shut down on me. So we're going to be looking at the rat, because that happens to be where I am in the Pathfinder second edition bestiary, which is what I have been reading lately. Okay, so the first thing you're going to note, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so I can actually see it on one page, because I had made it a little bit larger so I can see it better for reading, even with these glasses on, or reading my reading glasses. That font's a little small for me, and so I increase the size. So the first thing you're going to notice is that every single creature entry has a sidebar, and the sidebar is going to give you a bit of generic information about the creature. Okay, this particular one says rats and disease, and that switches from monster to monster. So depending on which side of the page you are, sometimes they're on the left side, sometimes they're on the right side. It's on the, I believe it's on the side that is the outside edge, because I'm looking at a digital product and not a physical book in front of me. Then it gives a little blurb about rats in one font and font style. Then we go into giant rats, and then we get into the giant rat stat block. I'm going to bring this up a little so I have an easier time of reading it. Now, these stat blocks are much smaller. They are not titled. So the only title here is the word giant rat. Nothing else. It's not broken down into defense, attack, stats, ecology, none of that. And right next to that, it says, not next to it, but on the outside edge of that word of the stat block, or on the same line with giant rat, it says creature -1. So we're not getting a challenge rating. They've just designated that these creatures are again set against a target of 0 and where they fall on that category. So instead of doing like a half challenge rating, they're doing a -1. And the more powerful the creature is, the higher that number will be. Then they give in this case, 3 colored blocks. The first one is kind of a slate blue, and that is the alignment, which in this case it's neutral. Then we have a green block, which is the word small in it, denoting their physical size. The next that we have what they are, animal. Now, if they are more than one thing, those will be next to it. So if something is, a beast, an aquatic, and celestial, those would all be next to it in case that there is a creature that has those particular characteristics. Now we have perception, which is going to give you, in this case, it's +5. We have low light vision, scent, imprecise, 30 feet. And I appreciate having those right out of the gate. Stop that. Having to make sure my screen doesn't go to sleep on me. Then we have skills, acrobatics +5, athletics +2. They have shrunk the skill set in second edition somewhat. I have no problem with that. Then it says +4 to climb or swim, and stealth +5. Next we get the physical stats. These are your statistics. Now here they've done a bit of streamlining, which I really appreciate, but they've done away completely with the statistics numbers themselves, and they only list the bonuses and penalties. This is what Mutants and Masterminds did with their entire stat mechanic, so everyone has that same situation. So if a human would have a 0 in all 6 stats, because they're average. They have no penalty, and they have no bonus. So it's 0. Okay, and that's what they've done here. So in the case of a giant rat, is +1 strength, +1 dex. You realize giant rats are considered +1. They are small. Okay. Well, I guess they all, they are kind of, all muscle and such. Con +2, intelligence -4, wisdom +1, and charisma -3. Now, the interesting that I've noticed, because again, I'm up to the R's here. I've noticed while reading this that I've been checking every single entry, not necessarily word for word, because I hate devils and demons and dragons for the most part, bore the crap out of me. So a lot of things I did skip, but I have been looking here. They definitely have different categories. For example, you could have -5 mindless, which would equate to a 0. And then you could have just -5, which would be a 1. Then you have -4, which equates to a 2. And that seems to be the animal category, but not always, because the octopus has a -3. That puts it into the same category as sapient beings. I don't remember if apes are, but the apes should be in there as well, as should cetaceans. So there are animals that really should be in the -3, not -4 category, and that was true all the way back to first edition. They're animals that definitely, in my book, are on the same scale, the range of intelligence as we are. It's just a very different intelligence. Now we get into the AC and then the saves, all in one line. And then we get into the hit points. There are no hit dice here, and just the hit points. And so if you want to know how many hit dice a creature has, you pretty much don't get to know that. You just get the hit points, and you have to rely on the saving throws to kind of reflect how powerful they are. Then we get speed, 30 feet, and humans have a 25 in this system, so rats are faster than humans, and that has been my experience as well, even as dealing with pet rats, but rats are fast. Then we get climb, 10 feet. They don't have a swim speed, which is kind of weird, because rats do swim. Rats swim at least as well as they climb. Rats are tenacious survivors. Then we get into a melee, and now we've actually built the icons into the stat blocks themselves, which again, I don't like them. I don't like that. Sorry. I don't like that a whole lot. It is what it is, I guess. And it says jaws +7, so you know it's a bite attack. I don't know why they don't say bite. They say jaws. They're breaking this down into very specifics. Then they give agile and finesse. You know that is an agile attack, so it's really very much based off of their dexterity. They're not brute force creatures. Then it says finesse, so it's ability that is light and fast. Then it says damage, 1d6 +1, piercing plus filth fever. So all very important. Then it gives a little stat block for little information about filth fever. It says disease, and then it gives the saving throw for that. And it says that it is DC 14 fortitude. Then it gives you breakdown into the specific stages. So stage 1 is carrier with no ill effect for 1d4 hours. Stage 2, sickened 1, which is a very quantified way of saying this person is sickened to the first level of a sickness. So sickened 1 is a specific quantity of sickness. It says that lasts for 1 day. Stage 3 is sickened 1 and slowed 1. So you're still sick, and now you're not physically moving as quickly because you are sick. That lasts for 1 day. And then it says stage 4, unconscious for 1 day. And then stage 5, you be dead. So you really want to get that straightened out before you hit stage 4, if you can. And if you don't get it straightened out after the person falls down on their face, they're going to be dead the next day. And then we go into the rat swarm, and as an example of what I mentioned earlier about each that line where it says neutral large animal swarm, that's what's in here. So it says again that the first 3 are the same as the giant rat, neutral, large, and animal in this case, because it's a swarm, it's not a single rat. Then it says swarm. This is a swarm. So again, those things can get as long as they want to. It's much like German words as they add new things to it. Now, you'll notice something about this particular stat block. As opposed to the first edition of Pathfinder, I should say, first edition. No, don't stop that. Stop that. It's giving me highlights. I don't want highlights. So this one tells me a lot more specific information about the creature. There's no experience points here. It doesn't. The challenge ratings here, which is the case of Aboleth, is 7, and it gives the XP. There's no XP here. It just says that in this particular case, the giant rat is a -1, whereas the swarm is a creature 1. So it's more dangerous than a single rat, which kind of makes sense. And then it gives the lawful evil, huge, aberration / aquatic, and those would be individual little blocked, color-coded words in second edition. Then it gives, but it doesn't give me a breakdown for the AC as far as touch and flat-footed, because second edition handles those things differently. It gives me hit points, but it also gives me the hit dice, and I find that useful to know. I want to know how they are deriving that, because some creatures don't necessarily use the D8 hit dice. Some are different, okay? So I find that interesting. The speed, the melee, this gives you a space, and this is just assuming that if something is small or something is large, you know what the space is. You don't need to have the space written in the stat block. I kind of understand that shortcut. I do. And you're assuming that every single creature that is a specific size is going to have the same reach. Maybe that's true. I don't remember. I don't remember if every single huge creature has the same reach. Does every single large creature have the same reach? Or is that going to be different depending on the creature? Something with a tentacle may have a different reach that goes beyond its size. Then it gives, but the things that it's not listing in this here is the ecology. And I find the ecology really damn helpful. I want to know where I'm going to find this, and that's not in here. Sure, I know where you're likely to find a rat swarm, but let's face it, lots of creatures in these games are very, very weird and strange, and we are not necessarily going to know off the top of our heads where you're going to find them in the ecology of the world. So I want to know where they're found, and the second edition doesn't give me that information. It's not giving me the organization. Now, a rat swarm is easy to understand. Weird creatures like the Aboleth, it says solitary, pair, brood, or shoal. So now I know what they're called, and I kind of like the different nomenclatures for different sizes, like a murder of crows. I find those kind of things fascinating, and I like the fact that that same style of nomenclature usage, language usage, has been translated to fantasy creatures. I appreciate that. And then it gives the treasure double. There's no entries in there for the second edition. I'm pointing at my phone. No entries in there for that kind of thing. And I want them. I want those stats. I want to know the ecology of the creature right in the stat block. Now, as I mentioned, there is a sidebar for each and every entry, and that information is sometimes in the sidebar, or it's going to be sometimes in the description. But I want numbers. I don't want vagary. And if you're giving me a vague description of something, that's not numbers. You're asking me to adjudicate it on the spot and kind of hoping I'm going to have a rough idea of a challenge rating, and I could be completely off. Because I could throw 4 of something at a group once, and then 4 at them a different time, and then treat it differently because I forgot what I did the last time I did it. That's not good in my book. It just isn't. You took out what I consider to be vital information from a stat block, and I am mystified as to why you did it. You streamlined a bunch of other stuff in the second edition, but you left that out. And it's just, I'm just like, why would you do that? I understand you're trying to get, more information for your page count, but that's vital information, and I can't figure out why the folks sitting around a meeting table decided that would be one of the most important things to cut out. And not happy with it. Not happy even a little bit. So this video has run on really long, and I apologize, but it is what it is because we are discussing stat blocks in detail here over a number of different versions of D&D. And again, I consider Pathfinder 1st Edition to be a direct extension of 3.5. And remember, 1st Edition Pathfinder is backwards compatible with 3.5. So you can use all of your 3.5 material with Pathfinder as long as you're all willing to make a few minor adjustments. And that's important in my book. That backwards compatibility, that transparency from 3.5 to 1st Edition was very important. That doesn't exist with 2nd Edition. The stat blocks are considerably different. The whole game structure is different, and I understand that. But the fact that 2nd Edition is, in my mind, no longer a spiritual inheritor of D&D is significant. And that will be reflected when I do a discussion on 2nd Edition in detail. But right now, I just had the stat blocks running through my brain because I'm currently reading the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary. And I'll probably finish reading that, and then I'll do the video about the whole 2nd Edition itself, which may be a video that runs this long. I don't know. We're going to get there. We'll find out. Alrighty, so let's talk about the specificities of stat blocks in D&D and its inheritors. Now, if you want to throw the OSR games into this discussion, feel free. Because again, I discussed 1st Edition, so the OSR stat blocks out there in the world are going to be similar to that. So if you want to discuss things that look like 1st and 2nd Edition D&D, go ahead. If you want to discuss the 3rd Edition because you thought there was a difference between 3rd and 3.5 that was important to you, we can discuss that as well. I haven't read 4th Edition. I'm never going to read 4th Edition. And I haven't gotten around to reading 5th Edition yet. I plan on it at some point. I have a number of things in my queue. I have at least one thing that someone's asked me to review, which I need to get to. And then there's a couple of other things I want to read before I get on to 5th Edition. That is in my short-term queue. I'll hopefully get to it before the end of 2021. We'll find that out. Alrighty, so let's talk about stat blocks. What we like, what we don't like, what we think was a good change, what we think was a bad change, and what would we do different if we could.